All right. Good morning, Doug. I just wanted to run through a bunch of different headlines with you today, just to get your feedback on what's happening in the world. The first one, what do you think about all these efforts to gin up racial discord in America today? I mean, we saw this with last year's Black Lives Matter, and now it's happening with, the sort of Asian Lives Matter kind of thing relating to the shooting last week at the massage parlors. What is your take on all this?
It's it impresses me as something that's being done with complete complete intention. I mean, these people are actually, by emphasizing race, they're making it into a big deal. And when you trace race relations in the US, uh, perhaps they've never been good because of the fact that almost all the blacks that were brought over here were brought over as slaves. And yeah, we know the whole story. But there was a time when, blacks and whites, I think, just in my personal life, I mean, you always notice the difference. I mean, it's genetically bred into us to identify people from a distant group, a different group, as being a danger. I mean, even if it's a different tribe, for hundreds of thousands of years since genetically modern humans emerged on the scene, they say 200, 300,000 years ago, if you saw somebody that was dressed differently or kind of looked different, you knew he wasn't part of your local clan, that was for sure. Maybe he probably wasn't even part of your tribe. Therefore, he was a danger. So yeah, of course, it's natural that people from different races that look different are suspicious of each other. Potential danger. Okay, fine. But I think this was going away it was diminishing for a long time. I mean, that's just my personal experience. And then these people come up and start re-emphasizing it again. Black families were starting to do pretty well until they started putting them into vertical ghettos. I mean, when the old ghettos existed, yeah, they were crummy. But when the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and all the other groups came to the US, they lived in really crummy ghettos in New York and other eastern cities. I mean, they were the type of thing we bulldoze today. All right, the blacks were going through this stage, living in places like that. Then we put them into vertical ghettos, which and they were free, basically. So that emphasized, the difference between the races, because white people didn't live in those vertical ghettos in Chicago and St. Louis and such. That emphasized the differences between the races. And now it's not just something that you notice, but it's something they're emphasizing. I mean, they're actually fanning race hatred. It's it's not going to end well, especially since back in the days when blacks were actually coming up on their own, the way previous groups did, they were about 13% of U.S. society. Okay, fine, but now with the new waves of immigration coming in, of people that are, well, there's a third racial group now. Hispanics speak different languages and so forth. The problem is that white people are becoming a minority, and that's going to be scary for a lot of white people. It's like a formula for violence that's being built up. So I guess it's kind of a long-winded answer, but this is very bad, and I can't see how it can end well, and I don't see what's going to change it, because you've got people that are, becoming wealthy and famous by creating hatred, saying that they're trying to do the opposite, fight hatred.
Right. It's, on the Asian side of things in particular, that's come up recently. It's just so, I mean, it's so dumb for me to even call out the double standards that are out there on these things, because they're everywhere. Double standards are everywhere these days, and it's sort of irrelevant, I think, at this point. But the, there's so much actual discrimination, institutionalized discrimination against Asians, actually, especially, it's demonstrated at Harvard, for instance, that they specifically discriminate against Asians in their enrollment because it messes with their, social objectives, essentially. So, of having more diversity, they discriminate against Asians, and nobody cares about any of that. And but when it can be ginned up as though a white person is specifically targeting and attacking Asians, when that can be ginned up, then everyone jumps on that bandwagon, or not everyone, but the normal, the hate people basically jump on that bandwagon and try and position it as an example of white hate and white supremacy and all of this other stuff. And it's what's crazy is if you follow social media stuff at all, it's just how much people just fall in line like zombies, kind of copying the same efforts they did with BLM, where, instead of posting a black square, on your Instagram page or whatever, they're posting a yellow square, which is, I don't know. I mean, kind of deeply, I would think it would be offensive in and of itself.
Yeah, there was a time not long ago when Jews in certain countries had to wear yellow stars. So it's kind of a bad direction for things to be going.
It really is. It really is. So so it seems like this is going to keep continuing, and I think it's because there's part of it. It's like the lowest common denominator of discernment between humans, is looking at these obvious issues like race. And I'm surprised and disappointed that our population would be so stupid to be pulled into this trap over and over again. It seems designed only to make us hate each other.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not just race. It's gone to the difference between males and females. If I was a young male who was dating at this point, I would be very cautious about establishing a relationship with a young female, because it might come back to bite me now with some kind of a phonied up charge, or 20 years from now. I mean, this is just in the air. So I wonder if this is even going to have a major impact on the rate of reproduction, where women don't want to be seen as baby bearers, and men are increasingly cautious about hooking up with them because of the potential legal consequences.
That's a terrible thought, but I think you're right. So let me ask you about this. Because this was big in the news recently. If you have any take on this Boulder shooter situation, it's probably 30 miles or 40 miles away from me where this happened, where a man went in and shot up a King Soopers grocery store and killed 10 people along the way. Any response to that? Any thoughts about it?
Yeah, of course, here I am out in the Pampas of Uruguay. Well, not actually the Pampas, because I'm close to the beach, but I watched Tucker Carlson last night, and he pointed out, so this is my main source of information, and Tucker is at least semi-reliable. So this is a guy that was he an immigrant, or were his parents immigrants from Syria?
He was an immigrant. He came here when he was a teenager.
Yes, and he has a very obviously Islamic Arabic name, and he's a citizen. So he got a gun, and apparently he just hates, who does he hate? We don't know much about him yet, but it seemed, at least based on at least the things that Tucker displayed, is that the liberals that were tweeting, professional liberals, professional professors, were tweeting, they automatically assumed that he was a white male. Then when it turned out that he was an Arab male, they they kind of brushed that under the table. So this is once again, it's just baiting hatred. I mean, it's like these people are trying to foment a civil war or perhaps a race war. And they very well might get one, because it's only a question at this point of what the catalyst will be that sets things off. And I guess that the catalyst is going to be a collapse of the financial markets, and combined with vastly higher retail prices, which are on their way. So that's going to make people unhappy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, I think that there are two reasons that they assumed he was white. Or at least this is what people claimed. Number one is that white men are responsible. They say they hate people are responsible for most.
Well done.
Yeah, of course. So it must be white. Number two, the fact that cops did not kill him, he must be white. Because if he were of any other race, then the cops would have shot him.
Yeah.
And of course, when you saw him, like he was relative when he was taken out of the grocery store, he was a light-skinned man, and so
Of course, a lot of people are unaware that when the Europeans invaded the Middle East during the time of the Crusades, starting at what was the first crusade, 1098, I think, and there were crusader kingdoms in the Middle East for the next couple of hundred years. So a lot of people that live in the area of Syria are actually blue-eyed and blondes because of, and the Crusaders at the time were basically Vikings. They were Normans and Germans and so forth. So yeah, a lot of Middle Eastern Arabs actually look like normal Europeans.
Yeah, but it's funny that as soon as his name was released, which they didn't release it for until the next day, which then allowed the news cycle to be filled with this white hate idea. And then as soon as his name was released, people were like, don't give him attention. We shouldn't discuss his name.
Right. It's very funny. But of course, Biden got on the air and said, oh, we've got to pass a gun bill, not just tomorrow, but 10 minutes from now. So what kind of a gun bill is this going to be? And could this be the catalyst that sets things off? Maybe it won't be a financial collapse. Maybe it will be that these idiots, try to take a gun bill seriously, and people will react.
Yeah, it just seems like these bills are just have been sitting on the sidelines waiting for any opportunity to come to light, and so as soon as these things happen, and especially the one in Boulder, they just dust it off and bring it to the floor. And I mean, there's going to be a lot of I think there's going to be a lot of momentum to pass these things. They want to get rid of the filibuster, which basically, assuming Republicans would even actually stand up and try and stop it, I think that they get rid of the filibuster and they can just roll right over them anyway. So
yeah, Republicans they're actually shameful. They're such thoroughly intimidated whip dogs that have absolutely no principles at all. Their only principle is, yeah, you're right, they say to the Democrats, but you're going too far, too fast,
Right.
and that's what's wrong. So it's pretty hopeless, actually. And we've got to remember, we're just at the very beginning of the Bolsheviks controlling Washington, and they're going to get much more and much tighter control. That's absolutely going to happen. They will pack the Supreme Court, and they will work to get Puerto Rico and DC as states to get more representatives, but more importantly, 4 more ultra-left senators. And situation really looks pretty hopeless at this point.
It does, but let's talk about something weird that's happening with economic data that's out there, because I and you have been expecting us to be entering, as you said, the other side of the eye of the hurricane, where the Greater Depression, you call it. But there's weird things happening with the economic activity that kind of belie that idea, I guess. And things like, for instance, that commodity prices, of course, are way up, and it seems in a great part because of demand. I mean, we have used car prices are up 12% year over year. Residential construction is up 16.5% from its February 2020 peak. Auto inventories are 26% lower than they were in February of 2020. Um, the census in terms of retail inventories, we have the lowest sales to inventory ratio since 2012. And of course, a lot of this has to be driven by the fact that globally there's fiscal stimulus happening everywhere, including the 1.9 trillion that we just, that was just passed, and a lot of it sent out to individuals recently. But there's just seems to be an enormous amount, like a shortage of goods. And, that's going to drive prices up, obviously. But how does that even make any sense that this could be happening? I don't understand. What do you think?
Well, it's pretty much like the analogy that I have given in my financial books in the past. It's, let's just figure out what would happen if the government, forget about $1,400 or whatever they gave people. Supposing the government deposited $10,000 in absolutely everybody's bank account this Sunday night. Everybody wakes up Monday morning. Wow, I'm rich. So what happens? You start going out and buying all kinds of crap that you always wanted to buy. And maybe if it's a big item, like a swimming pool or a car or a house, you just use that $10,000 to put down a down payment and borrow more money to finance it. So that's kind of what's happening. It's, you give people free money, it's going to basically stimulate a lot of consumption, a lot of extra consumption. And when people feel that they're richer than they really are, as most people would if $10,000 arrived in their bank account, well, you tend to work less. I mean, if you're a dentist, maybe you take off, not just on Tuesday morning to play golf, maybe you take off on Thursday morning to play golf too. So there's less production down the line and more consumption, and prices rise because there's more money competing for less real goods. So that's what's happening. That's what's happening now, and it's going to get much worse. But interesting. Well, we were talking before we got on the air. You mentioned that you found there were a lot of shelves empty in the U.S., which is kind of anomalous in this kind of an environment. Or
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah, I've never seen this before in my life. We have, and of course, I don't, I'm not going into these major retailers that often. I'll go again this weekend just to check and see. 'Cause I last time was about a month ago, but what I saw when I was there is that about 30% of the total shelf space is empty. Maybe 25 to 35%, something like that. And it stood out to me because I had experience before with a consumer products business when we fought like hell to get shelf space. I mean, it was a huge effort on our part we had to hit certain metrics in each retail store in order to be able to retain that shelf space, or we would get kicked out of it. We'd lose it to someone else that could produce better sales for the retailer. So there was never this empty space before, but there's a lot of it now. And it is very strange. It is very strange to me. So I don't know. I wonder if maybe because maybe we have these just in time inventory systems. And then maybe, because it was about a year ago right now is when the stock market sort of crashed in realization that, there was a global pandemic. Maybe everyone got really careful and cut back all their orders and stopped all production. And then, assuming the worst, and they just haven't been able to ramp it up basically since then. Maybe there's just this, I don't know. It's weird though to me.
It's a question of a lot of distortions being created in society where false signals are being given about what's going on. And that's what interest rates are about. And that's what money's about. It's telling people what's actually happening in the world of production and consumption. So these things are going to be sorted out at some point, surprisingly quickly. And that's part of what the depression is going to be. So, and the inflation figures that come out of Washington. Powell, who's, basically a nothing, nobody bureaucrat, and now he's the second most powerful man in the world, or maybe the most powerful, actually. what are they still talking about inflation being 2% or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, nobody believes that. I mean, it's very much like the Argentine government, which very forthrightly gives inflation figures that everybody knows are completely ridiculous. But when these things are said, I mean, the word is father to the thought, and it corrupts the way you think. So nobody can believe that we have only 2% inflation in the US based on the prices that you see of things going up. It's crazy. More distortions, more misallocations of capital, less trust. I mean, and it's creating an attitude where people say, I actually can't believe any of these things. It's creating a sense of cognitive dissonance in my own head.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of distortions. The other thing that obviously has to be a factor with the shortage of goods is the fact that incomes in the US last year were actually higher than they were in the prior year because of all of the extra stimulus that was out there, including, and especially I think these unemployment benefits, which in a prior episode we went through how that 1.9 trillion stimulus was going to be spent, and there was essentially budgeted in there the assumption of unemployment for 26 weeks for something like 36 million people, earning more than they earning more than they earned when they were working in many cases. So you have all this time on your hands, you're not producing anything, and you have more money than you ever had before. I guess, that how could that not lead to higher prices and shortages of goods?
Yeah, exactly. And not only are the inflation figures unbelievable, but the unemployment figures are also unbelievable. I mean, none of this actually makes any sense anymore. Just like the prices in the stock market are unbelievable and interest rates are unbelievable. I mean, as this stuff starts to sort itself out over the next year or two, with more laws being passed constantly and more draconian laws, this is going to get wild and crazy.
It is. As these distortions work their way out of the system, it's going to be insane. One thing that I don't think you saw Jerome Powell's testimony before Congress yesterday, but he was talking about Bitcoin and gold. And one of the things he did is he described Bitcoin. He said Bitcoin is actually very similar to gold. Bitcoin, he says, is not a replacement for a currency. He said it's more a substitute for gold, which sort of bolsters the argument. I don't know we don't really want to be on the same page as the Fed chairman on anything, but I mean, it sort of bolsters the same argument that we have made here that Bitcoin does in fact have a lot of the same actual attributes that gold has in terms of the value that it can provide. But he also said that he made this comparison that Bitcoin is actually like gold, not like the dollar, not like other currencies. But he also said that Bitcoin is not a store of value, and by implication, he was saying that gold is not a store of value, and by implication, that really the store of values in the world are in financial assets or in the big currencies like the euro and the dollar.
Yeah, the question arises: is Jerome Powell, or like Yellen before him and Bernanke before her, is he a knave or a fool? Because to imply that the dollar is a store of value, I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. It's like evaporating before our very eyes. So this is actually insane. I mean, he's got to be a criminal personality to say something so blatantly stupid and blatantly wrong in public and appear to believe it. So no, I'm just actually shocked. And the worst part of this is that we know, I'm sure he'll lead to this soon, is that they're going to come out with a digital dollar, just like that fat guy, that 400-pound whale that's the head of the Bank of International Settlements.
Yes,
I think that's in Basel's where it's located. So. Yeah, they said we can't have all this paper currency floating around because we don't know where it's come from. We don't know who's owned it. We don't know what people are using it for to buy. And we have a right to know because it's our liability. It's our currency that we printed up. So we have a right to know what all these little people are doing with it. So that's why they're going to have digital currencies, so that they'll know exactly where it all is and who had it and what they're buying and what they're selling. Jesus. And of course, the average chimpanzee is going to go for it because he'll have it on his iPhone. It'll be really simple and convenient. He won't have to pay $50 a year to Visa for a credit card. He'll get his FedCoin account free from the government and just use your iPhone or something like that to buy and sell. And the average person doesn't know from nothing. Yeah, it's true. Klaus Schwab said, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Yes. Well, I'm going to link to that, to the video of this giant man from the Bank of International Settlements. And you could just hear from him. Everybody should look at that. It'll be in the description. You should watch it and hear from the horse's mouth, essentially, why central bank digital currencies are absolutely coming. And it's basically so to increase their level of control they have over everything you spend on, who you buy it from. And, and they can stimulate the economy very effectively. And they can, when they feel like it's overheating, they can slow it down by essentially giving money and taking money away from various participants in the economy. So it's awful, honestly, when you think about what these guys have planned.
Yeah, it's scary, that and the fact that international travel, I really question whether international travel is ever going to really recover after this.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like one thing after another. And what's going to happen when we actually, due to all this money printing, get into what Mises called a crack up boom, where people just buy stuff because they've got a lot of money, A, and they want to get rid of it, B, because they're not too bright, but they're not so stupid that they don't see prices are going up quickly, and you better buy it today as opposed to tomorrow. So there's a huge overconsumption and pointless hoarding of things you don't need just because you got to get rid of this phony money.
Right.
This is just going to be insane. I mean, when something like that happens, kind of a relatively backward place like Venezuela or Zimbabwe or Germany in the 1920s or Yugoslavia in the 90s. Okay, that's fine. People are still kind of close to the land and they've got relatives that are farmers and grow food, and it's not a really highly sophisticated economy. But when that happens in the West, where everything is urbanized and digital, it's going to be chaos.
I agree. Well, let me end on a positive note, though, because you have long been you've well known, at least being a supporter of mining stocks, gold mining stocks in particular, and you've been talking about them certainly a lot over the last through these episodes that we've done. And I just saw a report that I forwarded to you, but I'm sure you haven't had a chance to read yet, that says that the long-term ratio of gold miners to the S&P is roughly 70% below its historic median. So basically that it's gold stocks are their cheapest level relative to the S&P in the last 70 years. And as a sector, has the highest margins and lowest valuation of any S&P 500 sector.
That's exactly right, because fund managers, have been taught that gold is nothing more than a rock. They don't want to own gold stocks. They don't understand gold and actually dislike it. And gold mining, they don't understand that at all. So they're very under-owned at this point. And I'm still of the opinion, and I hope I'm right on this, because I'm very long gold stocks, that as things start change, there's going to be a panic into gold, and these gold stocks, which are extremely cheap and a teeny weeny, not even a micro cap portion of the market, they're a nano cap portion of the market. People are going to flood into them, And it's going to be like trying to get the contents of Hoover Dam through a garden hose. That's just what's going to happen. I could be wrong. I mean, we could have a credit collapse tomorrow morning and, you know, the whole world could reset in some way that nobody can predict right now. And I'm betting on these gold stocks, and, you know, a lot of them actually pay dividends. Not huge, but 2-3% dividends. And some of them, some of the better ones, actually, like Agnico Eagle is selling it around 8 times earnings. You know, that's unheard of. I mean, I thought stocks were supposed to have earnings.
Not anymore. Well, that's why they're so unpopular, Doug. Only stocks without earnings are popular.
That's right. So, okay. So I'm still long gold stocks, and I'm trying to get more long oil stocks and oil related stocks as well.
Good. And if people want to, if they want to get a report that we put together a couple months ago that has some of the gold stocks that you own in it, they can sign up. In the description, there's a link to sign up for our email list, and you'll get delivered the report that has some of your favorite gold stocks in it. But it's just, this report is just, sentiment is so negative on these gold miners now. I'd say more negative than it has been in the last 12 months, it seems to me. And you know, this report basically just validated the whole idea that there's just a huge opportunity there. So
yeah, I really don't know what else you can do. I mean, you can speculate in a big market and hope that it keeps going up. I certainly do. But the big potential and the lowest risk is actually in the gold stocks and the oil stocks right now.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Tomorrow we have a guest joining us, Marco Wutzer, who's been on the show before. He knows a lot about cryptocurrencies and is going to be talking to us about NFTs and decentralized finance. So I look forward to that with him tomorrow. And if you guys are interested in that topic, be sure to tune in. We'll leave it at that, Doug. Thank you very much.
See you tomorrow, man.